We have been to a lot of church buildings in the Americas.
But today we're going to show you the oldest one.
Welcome to Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa. If you have been following us for a while and look forward to these at all, we are sorry that it has been several months since we have made one. This is episode 146, and 145 was probably made back in the end of the summer sometime. So we got really busy, went on trips, also have two little guys to take care of now, and we just weren't dedicated enough to get this done. But now we're back. So we have a lot of new places to tell you about, so that is one good thing. And we are going to start off with a place in the Dominican Republic. And so we are going to show you Santo Domingo. And we're going to look at a few places in Santo Domingo over the next couple weeks. This is Parque Colón, also known as Columbus Park in English. This is dedicated to Christopher Columbus, who discovered the Americas, at least for the Europeans. I mean, there were already people living there and who knew about it. But this is where they honor Christopher Columbus for his discovery. And that is the back of the statue. I took it there because of the good light. Here is the front with not so good light, but at least you get an idea of what he looks like. There's Christopher Columbus with some pigeons.
Lots of them.
Or something all over him. And we are going to talk today about that cathedral that is standing behind him. Now this little square here is kind of fun because there are not just birds on the statue, there are birds everywhere. And Jaden thought it was kind of fun, except I think right here he's kind of tired, so he's acting like he doesn't know what's going on, but it was really fun to walk through all these birds. And these couple guys here, they bought a handful of bird seed. And so they would just hold them in their hands and all these birds would flock onto them. And it was quite the sight. But this is Columbus Square, or Columbus Park in Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic. And this is our tour guide who we had for a day. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you are things that he told us, and whether or not they're actually true, I don't always know because I'm not native to there and I don't know much about this place, but we'll mention it. There's a couple things he said that are disputed. Anyway, what is not disputed is that this cathedral, the Cathedral of Santo Domingo, is the oldest cathedral in the Americas. And by that we mean North America, Central America, South America. There were people living here before this was built, and they had their various religions that they believed. But this was the first cathedral that was built with some kind of a connection with Jesus. Now, we also don't believe that those who built this had a fully right understanding of who Jesus is, but that's besides the point. So, like a lot of cathedrals that we have showed you before, it's beautiful inside. This definitely wasn't the most beautiful cathedral we've ever been to,
but probably the oldest.
Definitely
Well,
not.
I don't know.
No,
I've been to some in Europe. I guess
it's the oldest in the Americas, but we've been to ones in Europe that are definitely older than this.
That's true.
But we've said this before too, that a common theme among all these cathedrals is that it feels huge and empty and sad, because a lot of these people think that they are worshiping the right things and doing the right things to please God, and yet we know from the Bible that it's a lot of just emptiness and trying to rely on doing different works and good things to please God, and that's not what he's looking for. He's looking for people to place their faith in him. And so this is a nativity scene. I don't know if this was all year round or if this was there specifically for Christmas. That's my guess, because we were there in November, and so there was Christmas up everywhere already.
They love Christmas.
Yes. We like Christmas. They love Christmas in the Dominican Republic. So that's what this is. And then all around the building, they just had these various nooks with different stories or places you could pray, historical events. I think some of them might have been dedicated to different priests in their history.
Yeah.
But this was built in 1504, so it is a little over 500 years old and was around way before the United States was even thought of. This was used as a Catholic church, and I think prior to this even being built, prior to 1504, there might have been a mosque on this site. I think I read that somewhere. It's undergone several different
reconstructions.
Yeah. Wasn't it? I don't remember. I feel like he said something about an earthquake causing a lot of destruction to this many years ago. Or a hurricane. Was it?
Also, he talked about, too, that they started the project but didn't quite realize how much it was going to cost, and it kind of had to be paused, I think.
Oh, yeah, because
you can see some differences.
When you look at the different rocks out here, it's because they were built during different time periods. So if you look at the walls, there's different colors, different types of rock based on when it was built.
Yeah, and it was a pretty spendy project, too. I don't remember all the numbers. I just remember thinking, like, oh, that's a lot of money for back in the day.
Yeah. And it follows the Gothic style of architecture, which was brought over from Europe. He says that our guide said that Christopher Columbus wanted to be buried in the Americas when he died. That was his request, and supposedly that was granted to him upon his death, that his bones were brought here and buried in this cathedral. I read somewhere else that it was until 1795 that he was buried here. But then, well, we'll get to that in just a moment. I just want to show you a couple more pictures here. This is some more of the interior of the cathedral. And this is the back side. So I think this is also like the main entrance, but they don't use the main entrance when people are visiting. We went through the sides. But this is called the Lighthouse in Santo Domingo. And supposedly, Christopher Columbus's bones were moved from the cathedral where he was buried for a few hundred years to this monument once they built this. And so that's what our guide told us. And Alyssa was interested, and so she looked up some more about this gigantic monument, which the first time we drove by it, we had no idea what it was. We never stopped to look at it, unfortunately.
We thought it was something for the Olympics because it looked like it had a torch on the top of it.
Yeah, if you look there on the left in the middle, it looks like there's this giant torch there. But there had never been Olympics held in the Dominican Republic, so that was weird. But anyway, so what did you find as you were looking up this and its connection with Christopher Columbus?
So it's in the shape of a cross, and then there's a giant light in the middle, which is where we thought it was maybe like an Olympic torch. And that light is so bright you can see it from outer space, so they said when I was reading online. And it's a museum, the bottom half of it, so there's lots of different artifacts from places all over the world. Well, when I was reading about it, there are some claims, and it's pretty highly disputed, that Christopher Columbus is actually buried in Spain. I'm pretty sure Spain. Now I'm second guessing if it was Portugal. I'm pretty sure it's Spain. And they've even done some testing on the remains that they have there, and they're pretty sure that that's where he's buried. But the Dominicans claim that his body is buried here, and they have bones, but they may be another explorer. So if you go online, there's quite the discussion about it, going back and forth. But the Dominicans definitely want to claim that that's where Christopher Columbus is buried. But it's a very unique structure. And it's a lot of concrete and really interesting. We didn't go in it, but it kind of would have been interesting to at least see what the inside of it looked like as a museum.
But this whole thing is dedicated to Christopher Columbus, right? Mm-hmm. So our guide told us that his bones were moved here, and his request was to be buried in the Americas, but there are some who claim he's actually brought back to Europe now. Mm-hmm. So what is true and what is not, we don't actually know. What we do know is that if he did request to be buried here and he no longer is, unfortunately, he doesn't have a say in that. But
they built this too to kind of give a nod to Mayan architecture. So if you know anything about like Mayan buildings and temples and such, it has a very Mayan look to it. Things you would see in South and Central America too.
So that is the lighthouse, but also, as we were looking before that, the oldest cathedral in the Americas. Yep. And we're going to talk some more about Santo Domingo next week and something else that is the oldest in Americas. Mm-hmm. The Americas.
Okay, I have a brand new story.
Yes. And
it was brand new to me, so it'll be brand new, hopefully, to everybody else too. It's a big story. It's kind of a heavy bunch of cards, so hopefully I can hold it up the whole time. And this story is called Greasy, and I think that's somebody's nickname, but you're going to have to listen to the whole story to get it. And it's a pretty long story, so you're going to have to stay tuned for a lot of episodes so you can get the whole story out of it. And it is a true story. I was reading about it. It was first written down in German, and then it's been translated into English, and then now it's in this story children's format, so you guys can enjoy it. And it's called The Greasy the Robber, A True Story of the Power of the Gospel. So our story takes place in Russia. So here's a map of like Europe. So here's Europe over here, and Romania, Ukraine, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, so like Middle East over here. Here's Russia. Our story starts out over here in this part of Russia, and I'm going to try with some of these words, but I don't speak Russian, so my pronunciation, I'm sure, is not going to be fantastic, but I'll try. So, we will start off our story here with the name of our main character, and he's kind of way back here in the background a bit. But this is Pasha, and he was an 8-year-old boy who lived in Russia. And he and his sister Shura, along with their mother and their father, lived in that city that I showed you. I'll see if I can say it. Sosnovka, in the region of Mogilev. And they went to the Russian Orthodox Church, and they would attend pretty regularly and worship there. And they kind of learned about God. But kind of like Joshua was saying earlier, they didn't have really the right perspective of who God is and what he does for us. Well, on holy days, the priest of their village would come over to their house to play cards with Pasha's father. And the men would get into their game of cards, and then there was a rule with this game that if you were the loser, the winner could throw the deck of cards at your nose, which is kind of a funny game. So Pasha always remembered seeing the priest's nose look really red during the games because he usually lost, and Pasha's father usually was the winner. But the priest and his father would get together and they'd play these games, and they would do a lot of drinking. So obviously the priest didn't read the Bible well enough to know that he's not supposed to be drinking that much and to get drunk, and that's against what the Bible says to do. But they would do it anyways, and their games would get more and more intense and loud and crazy. But Pasha just thought this was normal. This was just what life was like. Well, the family lived there in this area for a long time, but then a couple years had really bad famine. So their crops didn't grow well, and these people were really relying on what they could grow out of the ground to live by. So Pasha and his sister, Shura, and their parents all packed up their things, and they decided they were going to take a train across Russia to a new area. So that's where our map was going to show up. So they're going to be in this area of Russia, and they were going to go really far east over here to Tomsk, and that was going to be a new area where the farming was a lot better, they didn't have famine, and they thought that'd be a better place for their family. So to travel there, they were going to travel by train. And it was going to be a long journey because when you traveled by train in this area, they would travel to one village and they'd stop and the train would park there for days or even weeks before it would keep going. So it's not like it would stop, pick up some people and keep going, stop, pick up. It would be like a long time in between these things. And because Pasha and Shura's parents were just farmers and they had just gone through a famine, they didn't have a lot of money. So they couldn't just go to a restaurant and buy warm food for their supper. They were just waiting till the next train took off so they could go on to the next city to get closer and closer. Well, instead they just had to make like soup with dried out fish and eat and drink unboiled water. So after a while, it was really easy to get sick. And as they were getting closer to Tom's, Pasha's father got really sick. And so they took him to find out what was wrong with him. And the doctors diagnosed him with cholera. And this was such a bad disease that he was taken to the hospital and everybody was banned from going to the hospital because this hospital was a place only for people who had this disease because they didn't want to share it with anybody else because it was so, so contagious. So their family just stayed there and waited, and they were still waiting on the train. And his father was really sick and the kids were sad and their mother was sad because she couldn't be with her husband, and they would go to the hospital and ask the guards at the door how he was doing. One day the guard said, "He's not doing well. He's not going to leave with you." And Pasha and Shura's mother was really sad that night. Well, the next morning she woke up and she seemed really sick. And so the hospital people came and they took their mother away also to the hospital and didn't let the children in. And the children did the same thing. They huddled together at night. They tried to boil some dried fish for their food and to drink some water, but it was kind of not very fun, and they didn't really have anybody to watch out and care for them. But they had this kind of little area by some fences by the train station, and they thought this is going to be the safest place for them. So they went back to the hospital and found out their father had died. And they were really sad. Now they didn't have a father. Their mother was in there. They couldn't even visit her. And the guards also said, "Your mother is also not going to live very long." And she died the next day. Well, the children knew from just being there that they saw after the people died that they would take the bodies from the hospital over to a graveyard. So the children decided that they were going to have to go visit the graveyard, and hopefully at least they'd be able to find out where their parents were buried. But they were really sad. Now they didn't have a mother or a father. They're not in their home area. They don't have anything or know anybody. And you're going to have to come back next time to hear the next part of the story.
Oh man, that is getting intense.
And heavy.
Yes.
It's a heavy stack of cards.
All right, we're going to tell you about one of the ministries that we got to see while we were in the Dominican Republic. Yep. And that is
Hogar de Bethesda.
This is in La Romana in the Dominican Republic. It is about an hour and a half away from Santo Domingo, maybe 2 hours east. And so one of the first days that we were there, this is where we went. And here it is. This is a place to care for children. And they don't necessarily call it an orphanage, although that's what we might think of it as in the traditional sense. And so here is the entrance to it. And Alyssa went I was doing some videos and things outside of here, but what did you see when you went in there?
It's just like a big open field area, and then there's that main house there on the right. So we went up to the door of the main house to talk to the lady who's kind of like the one in charge of the kids who are at this I feel like orphanage is not the right word for it because that's not what they call it. They call it a house of mercy, or for these children. And it's actually for boys currently, just boys who live here. And so we came up and we had, I think I was holding Jaden and somebody else was holding Jocelyn, and the lady saw him and she's like, in Spanish, she was like, "You're not leaving him here, are you?" I was like, no, he's coming with us. But she loved seeing him, and he waved at them and everything. And some little boys came around and smiled and waved at us too. But yeah, it's just a very simple space, but there's a lot of potential. I mean, look at this big area that they could do different things, make some different activities for the kids to play, and just a nice, safe space to take care of them and to train them.
Yeah, so they have that main building there. And then if you look off in the distance a little bit, you can see a basketball court that they already have for them. And their vision is to develop this entire space to use for the kids and make it a great place for them to live and to train them and help them grow. So that is Hogar Bethesda. And this is a view just beyond that little complex that they own there. And La Romana is surrounded by sugarcane fields.
So much.
In fact, this is one of the main crops down there in the Dominican Republic, especially in the south, which is where La Romana is located. And it's kind of sad on the one hand because a lot of immigrants who have come into the Dominican Republic are put to work in these sugarcane fields, and it's basically slave labor. And so that is not good. And so various ministries are trying to help people get out of that, or at least minister to them and help provide for their basic needs so that they don't have such bad living conditions, but all with the goal of sharing the gospel with them. So this is a sugarcane field that we stopped at and walked along. When I was little in the Philippines, my parents said that one of my favorite things to do was to chew on the sugarcane. So we got a fun picture of Jaden walking down the sugarcane field. And here is a view from above, and you can see they just go for miles and miles and miles. But Hogar Bethesda is right in the middle of sugarcane fields and this small little city, ministering to young people, providing them with hope, providing them with mercy. We don't have pictures of the people and the kids actually in there because we're not supposed to publicize that, but we wanted to give you a little view of what is going on down there and encourage you to pray for them because they have a lot of dreams, a lot of things that they want to accomplish as they reach these children with the gospel.
And they're really big on discipleship, on spending time investing in these kids and helping them really understand what they believe, why they believe it, and then be able to move forward and for them to be able to share with somebody else, just how Jesus did it.
Yeah.
He invested in his disciples, and then his disciples went and invested in more people. So that's their goal with Hogar Bethesda too. So make sure you come back next week, because hopefully we'll be here next week.
We will. And we will tell you about another place in the Dominican Republic that is really old. And we'll tell you about another ministry that we got to see in the Dominican Republic.
Thanks for watching.
Ciao.
Bye.